Hello, thanks for tuning in. Using this microphone for the first time, so I'm hoping that I can be heard. If somebody could maybe confirm that, anybody who happens to be watching, am I coming through loud and clear? If not, then I will revert back to the other microphone that I was using on previous occasions. So anyway, okay, well, let's assume that I can be heard. I can only see I can only see one dot out of six on the microphone meter. So I hope that I'm coming through. Okay, Kalasia 789, am I coming through loud and clear? Can you let me know, please? Can you hear? Am I coming through okay? Just waiting for that to be confirmed. Um, I'm up. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, then I'll continue. So yeah, I'm going to be going through some correspondence that I've had with a theist on my channel. I don't usually get involved with um, back and forths with people who come on with arguments that I've seen 100 times before. I don't usually do that, but occasionally I do. It depends on the situation. I suppose it depends on how irritating I find somebody. If I find them irritating and there's nobody else, for example, if a theist comes onto my one of my videos when most of the traffic has already seen my video and all I'm getting is a trickling of people watching it, and they leave a comment, there's literally nobody left to respond, then there are times when I might come on and make a few comments. You know, that can soon escalate, and I can find myself in a almost never-ending back and forth with somebody, and really, it's not a good use of my time. I try not to do it, but occasionally I fall into that trap. So before I get onto that, um, yeah, yeah, okay, fair enough. Calasia 789. Yeah, that's a good one. I could learn a lesson from you. I shouldn't allow myself to be irritated by theist nonsense. But I suppose it's one of the reasons I do this channel is because theist nonsense does irritate me and I want to counter it. So yeah, and I suppose it also depends on how they come across. So then there's probably more likely that I'm going to respond to them. But before that, let me just comment on one or two other things. Okay, first thing is, I'm not going to be doing many Matt Dillahunty videos in future. You know how I've partly built my channel on doing response and reaction videos to phone calls on the line. Well, that has been going well, and a lot of people have enjoyed that. Some haven't enjoyed it, and I'm not going to be doing so many of those. A couple of reasons for that. One is I find it a lot less interesting doing those things now. Two is that I really prefer to do my own videos and say my own thing, really, rather than comment on what Matt is, the way that Matt is handling calls and everything. And I think I've kind of done that to death. And there's not really much point in doing it anymore, unless I happen to see a call which I find particularly interesting or amusing. And then in that case, if I think it's going to be a really high quality call to cover, then I'll do it. The other reason being is that my financial circumstances have improved significantly, literally within the last month. Just briefly going into some personal stuff here. The reason being is that the uh, the maintenance support that I've been paying out in the wake of my divorce has now come to an end. And you won't believe how much difference that has made to my financial outlook. A huge difference. And I mean, to be honest with you, the small amount of money I made out of doing Matt Dillahunty videos, um, it's not worth my while anymore. And the fact that I no longer really need the money at all, and I don't really find it that interesting doing them. Consequently, I won't be doing many Matt videos in future. Okay, yeah. Yes, I know, Kalasia 789. I know. Most of the calls, I only do maybe one or two calls out of a line episode, and there are times when I don't feel like doing any calls at all, just because they don't really yield anything. And I actually enjoy listening to the line. And if I'm going to be doing response calls, it ruins it a bit for me because I've got a pad next to me and I'm writing down, I'm making notes, and it's actually quite hard work to do a call. It's a lot of work to do a call and to respond to a call, recording it and everything, and then uploading it. And it's certainly not financially viable. It never was. But to be honest with you, because of the maintenance support I've been paying out in the wake of my divorce, something which I've got no complaints about. I reached an agreement with my ex-partner, and I honored it. And just recently, we both agreed that um, there was no need for me to continue paying money. So suddenly, all the money that I'm earning is now mine. Can you believe it? I'm back to where I was 20 years ago, before 22 years ago, but before I got married. All the money that I'm earning is actually mine. It's like amazing. It really is amazing. I mean, it's crazy in a way. It's crazy in a way that why should, you know, I mean, I always think that living off other people's labor is a kind of immoral thing to do. And I would never do it to anybody. I would want to be independent as soon as possible. But anyway, the great thing is for me, I'm now all the money that I earn for myself, I can actually keep to myself. I don't have to send it anywhere, which, is pretty good. Okay, less of that. All right. So, okay, just a quick comment about I mentioned the last live stream I did about my friend who's a conspiracy theorist. I found he'd made some offensive comments about various things. And, I more or less decided to wind the friendship down and stop communicating with him because it's just one big headache listening to all his conspiracy theories, listening to his Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson misogyny and a lot of hate speech. It just became too much. And I decided to stop communicating with him. But there were one or two things that he said in the last couple of weeks, which I just want to talk about. Um, First of all, I'd like to say he's a flat earther. Yeah, so he's a flat earther, and no matter how much evidence I I demonstrate to him that in fact the Earth is not flat, the fact that we see different sets of constellations in the northern and hemisphere and the southern hemisphere can only really be explained by a globe Earth. He just ignores that. I don't know why, and there are other reasons too. He claims that by primary observation that the Earth is flat. We stand on what looks like a flat Earth, and indeed it is flat. No other questions need to be asked. And I photographed something last night. I was on the seashore. It was about 8:30 at night. We've still got plenty of daylight here where I am in Britain. I was on the western coast, and I happened to have my camera with me. It's not a brilliant camera. Here it is. But it's got a 30 times optical zoom. It's a Sony. It's not a brilliant camera, but actually, something, it can take reasonable photos and the zoom's not bad. And I'd always dreamed about catching a ship on the horizon and actually going over the horizon. I don't know how far off the horizon is for the sea. I suspect it's about 25 miles or something like that. And for a primitive camera like mine with just a 30 times optical zoom, it's going to be really difficult to capture a ship going over the horizon. However, last night I saw a ship on the horizon, a commercial ship, and I pointed my camera at it. I zoomed in as much as I could, and I mean, I could barely see anything of it, frankly. And I just took a couple of photos, and one of them I've now loaded to my community page. And in my opinion, it quite clearly sees either the ship is sinking, it's either sinking or it's quite clearly going over the horizon because you can't see the bottom of the ship. It looks like the water is all the way up to the what do you call it, the upper deck. I mean, it really looks to me like that ship is going over the horizon. It is a very grainy photo. You can't see the horizon clearly, but either that ship is sinking or it's going over the horizon. And I'm fairly sure that it is indeed going over the horizon, and it's fairly good proof for me that the Earth is curved, the Earth is a globe. I don't know how else that could be explained, and I thought of sending it to him, but he'll probably say, "Oh, it's a red herring, old boy. You've been that's refraction, or it's some other phenomenon, or I don't know, something like that." So I mean, somebody who is denying basic scientific facts, then yeah, I don't think that anything really is going to convince them. And if you could take a globe skeptic into a spaceship and with the Earth, they'd probably say, "Oh, you drugged me before I went up. I fell asleep, and you fed all that into my brain." There's just no, there's just no convincing some people. Okay, so there was that, and then yeah, he made another point because we were talking about dreams, and I mean, I don't believe there's anything in dreams. There are some hypotheses about why we dream. One of them to me is quite interesting. The reason that we dream is something to do with the optic nerve to, um, I don't know, somehow maintain it and regenerate it at nighttime so that when you're not using it, somehow these dreams um, trigger it in some kind of neurological way. I'm not too sure, but this hypothesis seemed to me, when I was reading it anyway, quite at least one naturalistic explanation. I know there are other explanations about why we dream, but in any case, his explanation is that there are astral planes. We've got spirits, and when we dream, our spirits go to these astral planes, and then they come back before we wake up, which to me is fairly unbelievable that that is the case. I mean, a lot of my dreams are just so absurd that it would be a really freaky kind of astral plane that I'm going to, I mean, based on my dreams. So, yeah, well, when I said to him, well, okay, we've got no real evidence for that. And then he said, think about if you went back in time, um, before we could communicate by telephone, and somebody told you that there were going to be these little handheld technological devices that we could use to communicate by mobile phone, by phone over across large distances. And you would have said 100 years ago, that is unbelievable, in the same way that I'm saying it's unbelievable that there are astral planes, etc. And I think, yeah, my response to him was that, um, yeah, absolutely, that 100 years ago or before the invention of telephones or anything at all, I would have been justified in not believing it. I would have been justified in finding it unbelievable that one day we would have these communication devices that could also act as storing all the world's music, encyclopedias, all the world's books, news, etc., etc. You would have found it unbelievable, or even maybe 40 years ago, you would have found it unbelievable that something like this would be an actuality. And you would have been justified in finding it unbelievable, particularly 100 years ago, in not accepting it as true or that it is could even ever happen. And what destroyed our disbelief? What stopped me from disbelieving? I asked him this question. I said to him, I didn't respond immediately. Actually, I had to think about that because sometimes conspiracy theorists, theists, etc., they present you with a point that it's got to come from a mind that is corrupted by bad thinking, and it could kind of sidestep you. And I sometimes have got to take away something like that and mull it over, try and unravel it and think about it, and then come back to him. And I came back to him. I worked out what the answer would be. I said, "Look, if I went back in time, let's say I went back to the 1960s and I watched Star Trek and I saw these, the communicators they had. And somebody said to me, you see those Star Trek communicators? One day everybody will have one of those and we'll be walking around, we'll be able to communicate with people wherever we are." And I wouldn't have believed in that at that time in the 60s. I would have said, oh, well, that's just science fiction. And to my question to him was, what would destroy my disbelief? What would change my mind about that and make me realize I was wrong? And he stumbled and he hummed and he hawed. He said, well, I don't know. And of course, you know what the answer is. And the answer I told him was, I said the reality and the actuality of the invention, demonstrating it to me and presenting it to me and proving that it's true. That's what would destroy my disbelief. and he didn't get that. He said, oh yeah. And so yeah, absolutely. And this is the way to destroy somebody's disbelief, to enlighten them, is to prove it to them with the actuality of it. So I got the actuality of the mobile phone. Now I accept it. I was justified in disbelieving it before there was any evidence it could even be true, of course. And in the same way with astral planes, what he's talking about, astral planes, astral projection, and all these different things, um, what's going to destroy my disbelief? The actuality of it, the proof that it's real. And, you know, he couldn't really get that. I mean, to him, because it sort of appeals to him and he's read a lot about it. It seems like a groovy idea. That's enough for him to believe that it's true. Or, you know, but the problem with all the astral planes and everything and all the rest of it, there's no direct evidence from anybody except people claiming that they've got spirits which have gone over to these astral planes, but they can't prove it. It's all just anecdotal. So that's the thing. You can disprove somebody's disbelief by just demonstrating it to them. It's like with God. You can disprove my disbelief by demonstrating God to me. Not philosophical arguments, not conjecture, not hypotheses, not claims, but actual evidence. Okay, so maybe it's the case that if there is a God, this God can never be demonstrated. But that's not good enough reason for me to believe that it's real, that it might be true, and that if it is true, it's of a nature such that it couldn't be demonstrated. Then it's tough. I suppose I'll have to go the rest of my life without believing in any God. Okay, so all right. So that was my friend. Let me just read some of your comments. This is an impromptu stream, just literally an hour ago. When I realized I probably wouldn't be doing any mat videos this week, I thought, actually, I've got one or two things I want to talk about in a stream, and I can just do a spontaneous stream, which is a great thing about YouTube. You can just come on and do something like this. Or I thought I'll make a recording of a video and I'll upload it. I thought, well, actually, I just make a few notes and I sit down and talk about these things. I'm not one of these YouTubers that scripts everything from start to finish. I just do it off the cuff, as many of us now do. So it's no problem at all just to do it. Okay, so moving on. Yeah, okay, so just before we get on finally to talking about these awful theist arguments, not too long to go. Have a quick look at your comments. XE Music, CB radio in the 70s. Yeah, we had CB radio, and of course we also had um, amateur radio hams communicating around the world by shortwave radio. Yeah, I know. And so really, to be honest with you, in the 60s, I would have probably found it quite believable that one day we would have these handheld communication devices, and even before that. But I think probably 150 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it. I would have found it unbelievable. Walkie-talkies, yeah, we had walkie-talkies. I remember, yeah, I had a walkie-talkie set. Me and my brother, we used to mess around with it. Um, yeah, well, there was another thing that this friend of mine, because I said to him about the communicators in Star Trek, and I said, look, we've got actually I used two examples, one that's come true and one that hasn't. So in Star Trek, you've got the communicators, which also, by the way, double up as phasers. As far as I understand, you can kill somebody with one. Actually, wouldn't that be groovy? Steve Jobs never did that for the Apple iPhone, did he? Had a laser beam built into it, or one of these tasers or whatever they call them. That would have been quite something. Okay, so yeah, so imagine you've got Star Trek, you've got the communicators as one thing that will one day come true. You've got two things which you don't believe in. Let's say the communicators and the transportation devices. What do they call them? Teletransporters, where you dematerialize and then you rematerialize somewhere else. And I said to him, of the two, which is more unbelievable, the communicating device or the teletransportation. And he kind of hummed and hawed about that, which really surprises me because to me it's a no-brainer. As a lot of you have said, we had CB radio, we had walkie-talkies, so we already knew it was possible to communicate without a cable over the airwaves. We already knew that was possible. So an extension of that is a personal communication device, which one day will be invented. And I think that there were people in the 60s and 70s who were probably forecasting this would one day happen. What about a teletransporter? Dematerialize and rematerialize somewhere else, a different place in the universe. Which of those is the more unbelievable? Well, definitely the second, by a factor I might add of about maybe 10,000. And he had to hum and haw over it. And then he suddenly said, oh, well, actually, that is possible. What? I said to him, oh, yes, that's how the aliens get to us. Oh, yeah, the aliens from light years away, hundreds of light years away, and in which somebody has presented a hypothesis on my channel. I posted it to the community page, a hypothesis, or rather a claim, that in fact there are these altruistic aliens, super omnipotent, super beings, really highly powerful beings, which exist somewhere hundreds of light years away, and they've got goodwill to us, they love us, and they're able to come to us, and presumably they would have to do this by teletransportation because obviously, as has been pointed out, even if they could travel at near the speed of light, it would take like 200 years to get here, by which time the people they cared about would all be dead by at least a dozen generations or something. So that doesn't really make sense, does it? So I suppose it would have to be teletransportation, and he's claiming that aliens are coming here by teletransportation. Yeah, well, you can imagine why I don't want to communicate with this guy anymore. It's and I say to him, "Well, how do you know this?" And he said, "Well, this is what I've been told." I say, "Well, do you believe everything you've been told?" I think, I think that when I meet people who are so uncritical about the information they're given, it it makes me worry for the human race. And just moving on topically from that is the tragic tale, not tale, but the actual reality that in the UK, three young girls were killed by somebody wielding a knife. A young man of 17 years old apparently went into some kind of dance group for youngsters, and they were dancing to Taylor Swift, it seems. He went in there with a knife. He killed three. I think a fourth girl's now died. He injured about half a dozen others, injured several adults, and was eventually captured. And he's now appeared in court about this, and I think he's been charged. But the point is, and this relates to my channel, um, this relates to religion, because as soon as it happened, people wanted to know what religion is this person, and a lot of people are hoping, and they're still hoping, that it will be confirmed that the the man who did this is a Muslim. I get the sense very much from watching various channels that people are waiting with bated breath for the news that he's a Muslim so that they can go out and take out their um, anger on the Islamic community. Now, they've already been doing this, even though there was initially a news blackout on his identity because he's just under 18 years old. And that didn't stop people from going out and throwing petrol bombs at mosques. They assumed already that um, he's a Muslim. Well, look, there's a hierarchy of hate. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. Hierarchy is the wrong word, really. Wish I could think of a better word. But anyway, there's a kind of I don't know, how would you describe it? There's a pecking order of hate. Yeah, maybe that's a better simile or metaphor. A pecking order of hate, and right at the top of that. No, I mean, obviously, I'm talking about certain people in the UK who consider themselves to be very patriotic. You would describe them as being right wing and against immigration, um, wanting to preserve what they think is British culture. which really means sort of white British culture. This is what they want, and they took this as a trigger to go out. So yeah, the pecking order would be at the top would probably be Islam, because there's this fear, whether real or imagined, that Islam is increasing in the UK. We've got too many Muslims coming. We've got the Islamification of UK streets and UK culture, etc. So they want, first of all, to take out their anger over this incident on the Muslim community. And then, secondly, if they find out, okay, it wasn't a Muslim, um, but it's this son of immigrants from Rwanda who came to the UK, I think in the 1980s or something, fleeing the genocide. And okay, so his name has now been released. It seems that I can't remember his name, but it's not a British sounding name. He sounds like the offspring of Rwandan parents. He's got a very sort of, I don't know how to put it, sort of non-British sounding name, and it seems that he's also black. Okay, so there's a picture floating around the internet, and yes, he is black. We don't know if he's a Muslim yet. It seems that Rwanda is 90% Christian, so I suppose by the odds that he's not going to be, what's the what's going to be the reaction if it turns out that he's Christian and not Muslim? Well, I suppose the reaction would be then that we allowed asylum seekers and refugees to come into the UK, and they had a child, and that child has repaid the UK back for its hospitality by carrying out this brutal act. The thing is, if you actually look at the racial profiling on all the murders and crimes that take place, you'll find that they're more or less proportional with the percentage of British white population, etc. There are plenty of heinous crimes committed by Christian whites. Of course, there are, but people conveniently forget this. The biggest outrage of all time in the UK in any school was when Thomas Hamilton in 1996, I think it was, went into a school in Scotland and killed 16 children. Now, he was a white British male. I mean, these things are conveniently forgotten. So I don't like Islam as a religion. I think it's one of the worst religions there is. But if some isolated nut happens to be a Muslim and goes out and kills people and does an outrage, it doesn't necessarily mean that Islam is to blame or that Muslims are to blame, and that this whole incident is being hijacked by the British far right for their own extremist and racist purposes. So, okay, that's all. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, when I hear about a crime like this happening, unless it's specifically done in the name of a religion, um, and I suppose you could argue that the 9/11 attacks, the the bombers were shouting Allah Akbar as they were flying into the Pentagon, or they tried to fly into the Pentagon. They were calling out, and I suppose you could argue that there was a sort of there's like a holy war going on against the USA. But in this case, there's no evidence that this is inspired by religion. I mean, that's the whole point. Okay, so that's all I've got to say about that for now. Let's move on. I try to avoid commenting on these things because it's quite ugly what's going on at the moment in Britain over this whole incident. And of course, there's nothing more ugly than the actual crime that was done. But all the violence that's gone on against the police, all the destruction that's taken place, it doesn't make any sense. What's the point in smashing up your own country to strike a blow for your country? It doesn't really make any sense what a lot of these people are doing. So, okay, so let's move on to these arguments. These arguments about God, that there's a God, effectively, because let's face it, that's what we're all interested in. And let's be honest. Let's be honest. You guys, I mean, those of you out there who are atheists and me, We don't expect there to be any evidence presented for the existence of God which will anywhere near convince us. We don't expect there to be any new arguments that will anywhere near convince us. And you are probably as pessimistic as I am about there being absolutely anything new whatsoever on this um, apologetic stage, shall we call it, which will move us one iota closer to believing in the existence of God. I have heard nothing in 10 years of listening to apologetics. I've heard absolutely zilch that has moved me 1 millimeter, 1 micromillimeter closer to believing in the existence of God. I don't believe that we'll see any new evidence. You don't believe it. I'm sure Matt Dillahunty doesn't believe it either. He sometimes, when people call in and say, "Oh, I've got a new argument," he will kind of feign interest and say, "Great, I'm excited." No, I don't think he's excited. And I'm not excited either because at best it will be some reframing of a well-worn argument. I'll just have a quick look at your comments just before I move on. Let's have a look. Yeah, welcome to everybody who's contributing to chat. Um, uh, okay. Okay. So XE Music says I'd rather discuss ghosts. Well, I suppose that the paranormal, psychic powers, um, supernatural religious claims, in a way, they're all kind of in the same pot, aren't they? They're all in the same ballpark. So yeah, but the one that gets the most boring, to be honest with you, is for me starting to be the existence of God. I'm probably like near death experience. I enjoy, well, I wouldn't say I enjoy, but I've investigated near death experience, and that can sort of be interesting because you're faced with a number of claims, and there's usually enough information out there to try and find out what the real story is going on behind this. And I find that quite interesting to look around. Although I find that quite a lot of the skeptical sites like Skeptics Dictionary and various forums have already done that job. And if you do a bit of clever Googling, you can usually find somebody who's done a really good job of unraveling. For example, the tale about the boy whose parents claim that he seemed to know information about a Second World War pilot who died. He knew his name, he knew where he'd gone down, etc., etc. And people quote that story to me all the time, like this is evidence of, I don't know, life after death or reincarnation or just something really weird and unexplainable. And when I actually went and did the research, yeah, I mean, I found that it was all completely explainable by two very enthusiastic parents who enjoyed all the attention their son was getting, fanned the flames of, this kind of mischievous deception. And there was really nothing remarkable in it at all. Absolutely nothing. But hey, they made a lot of money out of their book, didn't they? And good luck to them. If there's enough people out there ready and gullible enough to be conned, then that's fair enough. Just excuse me a moment. I'm just going to turn the light on in this room because it's getting a bit dark. Okay, sorry about that. Oh, right, now it's too light. Okay, well, I suppose too light's probably a bit better than too dark. It's going to, um, hmm, okay, well, anyway, I suppose that will have to do. I wonder whether I can somehow angle this away from the light a bit to reduce it. Well, okay, I'll continue. So yeah, these arguments. Yeah, so there was a video last week that I did, a Matt video, where somebody called in, and what were they arguing? They were arguing that effectively, they were arguing that God could exist outside of space time, and Matt was saying, well, no, because existence is temporal, existence is temporal, it needs time, and if there's no time outside of the universe, and if you're saying that's where God exists, and there's no time, then there are no seconds in which God could exist, and something which exists for 0 seconds is indistinguishable from something that doesn't exist at all. I think that's quite a good argument, really. I think that's fairly sound. Um, and then Matt started talking about meta time. Okay, so this is a hypothesis. It's not something that Matt believes in. He's just using it to illustrate a point that I mean, there might be we might be enclosed within some other sort of time dimension. I don't know, and that either maybe God exists in that, or the same rule might apply, that it's still some other kind of manifestation of time, and that God wouldn't be able to exist there either, because the word existence only has meaning within the universe. We use the word existence to mean something that is, something that actually manifests and can be demonstrated as being in reality in within the universe. Not it's strictly a time space relative thing, and it doesn't make any sense to use that word outside of our universe. Now, we don't know that there is anything outside of the universe. It may well be that in some sort of bizarre way that we don't understand at the moment, that there's some other kind of dimension in which a God is. Let's not use the word exist. It doesn't really matter, does it? I'm prepared to concede that by our lack of understanding of certain things, it may well be that there is a God somewhere, not in the universe, but somewhere in some kind of dimension. But this is all conjecture and speculation and hypothetical, without any evidence to support it. And I don't see any reason to believe in any of those things. So yeah, somebody came onto my channel and said, well, God is eternal, and eternal means timeless. Well, actually, no. Eternal doesn't mean timeless. Eternal just means that something that goes on forever. So, in fact, it can be something which begins to exist now and just happens by its nature to be able to go on forever. That could be an eternal thing. It doesn't mean that it's existed in the past forever. I mean, no matter how far we go back in the past. I mean, based on the definition that I've seen, it just means something that lasts forever. It doesn't mean something that's been around forever. So there's a distinction there, I believe. Yeah, so I think the point is that yeah, God God could exist outside of space time. God is timeless. God is eternal. I mean, okay, it's a pedantic quibble, really. This thing about God being God. God isn't temporal. God is timeless. All these claims, and it doesn't really matter to me how you want to define God. Whether you want to define God as timeless, eternal, existing in some kind of time framework or meta time, outside of the universe, inside of the universe. All these are just quibbles and pedantic points because they're all hypothetical, they're all conjectures. The only thing that matters to me is whatever definition of God you want to present, what evidence is there for that God? I mean, that's the only thing that interests me. So define your God. If it's a God that exists outside of space time, fine. Just demonstrate to me that it exists. So it's like a distraction. Theists will often get bogged down in it and try and bog you down in a distraction like this so that they don't have to talk about why they believe in God. Why do they do it? Why? I can only think of one motivation, although I'm sure you can think of others, but one motivation could be that they want to try and make atheists look foolish, or they want to try and prove an atheist wrong in something. Like, if you can prove me wrong in one particular point, even unrelated to religion, somehow you've debunked my entire worldview, and they can go away laughing and claiming a victory and that, oh, God exists after all. But it doesn't really work like that, does it? I can be wrong about lots of things, but I could still be right about there not being a God, or I could still be well justified in withholding my belief about God. I could have bad reasons for disbelieving certain things, right? I could be on shaky ground in a lot of my positions that I've got for various things, but I could be on solid ground in my disbelief in God. So scoring points over me and saying, "Oh, that's a fallacy," or, that's a generic argument, on something that maybe is not even related to religion, and then running away and saying, "Ah, atheist, got you again." I mean, that's childish, and it's not really being constructive, and it's not proving the case for the existence of God, really, is it? So, yeah, so this particular person, uh, we had a bit of a back and forth about that. And then I said, okay, well, look, get straight to it. These are all hypotheses. Maybe you're kind of God conceptually. I can handle that. I can agree that conceptually that God is valid, but does that God exist? How do you know it's not just an idea? And how do you know it's a reality? Because that's what we're really interested in. And okay, well, to be honest with you, I shouldn't have asked that question because whenever I ask that question on my channel, I tend to get more or less the same set of arguments time and time again. But just to go through some of what he said, first of all, he doesn't understand what atheism is because, you know, he said to me that, what did he say? He said that, oh, yes, he said, well, you're just like other atheists, just denying everything obvious. He said, isn't it the nature of atheists to deny things, to deny claims? And no, it's not the nature of atheists to deny claims, because atheism is only about one question, whether you believe in a God or not. You could say maybe for a skeptic, isn't it in the nature of skeptics to deny things? Well, not really, no. You could say that it's in the nature of skeptics to take a claim and then try to disprove it. Or skeptics typically will take things that they believe in and then try and honestly disprove them. But no, it's not in the nature of atheists to deny things. Personally, okay, I'm an atheist. It's not in my nature to deny things, but it's not in my nature to accept claims easily, depending on the claim. And the more unusual or striking the claim, the less likely I am to accept that claim unless a certain level of evidence has been presented. So I suppose you could say that on balance, it's in the nature of atheists to be skeptical, and by extension of that, to um, question claims to find out whether they're worthy of believing in. Okay, so that was one point. Straight off the bat, he's got a misunderstanding about what atheism is. Let me just have a quick look at your comments. Just excuse me a moment while I just read through. I also need to give my voice a break, by the way. Yeah, theists can't handle there not being a point to anything. Well, yeah, that's the thing. I think that a lot of people get some kind of meaning out of believing in a God. It somehow gives their life more, or at least they imagine it gives their life more, if they believe that there's a God up there that's watching over them and then has a plan for this person, and there's possibly going to be life after death. It gives them the feeling that their life is going somewhere, going to some kind of meaningful conclusion, not that it's just going to be extinguished at the end and there will be an eternity of nothingness, which I fully admit is a bit of a depressing thought, but that seems to be the way things are. Yeah, in fact, I did a video. What did I do a video on? No, I didn't do a video. I watched another conversion story recently online. This is the worst one I've ever seen. I'm not even going to do a video on it. It was just some guy sitting in a car saying that he'd always been an atheist, and he explained how he got some palpitations in his chest. He went to the hospital to get checked out. His mother, apparently, who's like 85 years old, has has had heart attacks and had problems, has a triple bypass surgery, etc. But she's still alive, mind, she didn't die. And he was afraid that he might also have that problem. Well, guess what? It turned out that all he had was some potassium deficiency that was causing him some issue with his chest. And he had supplements, and that made him better. And ever since then, he's believed in God. I mean, can you believe in such a stupid reason for going from atheism to theism? He said that it changed his worldview overnight. And since that time, God saved him. It wasn't a serious illness that he had. It was just something quite relatively harmless that could be cured. And thank God for that. And now he's a full blown theist. So I'm not even going to bother doing a show on that one. Definitely not. It's just so ludicrous. And to be fair, a lot of people in the comments were saying, this is not a good. This is not strong. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, purpose. And I mean, okay, if it could be proven to me that there was a God and my life did have some kind of divine direction, then yeah, I would accept that and accept that my life has got purpose. And who knows, I might feel more whole and better for that. But unless that's demonstrated to me, I'm not really going to believe it, am I? Okay, so let's have a look. What else did he say? Oh yeah, some good ones here. Yeah. So I said to him, yeah, because he's talking about intelligent design, and I said, well, there's no evidence that it was designed. That it seems to be the case that everything came about naturally occurring. We don't know everything, but we're piecing it together, and everything seems to be just as a result of nature. And he said to me, how can you tell me that? Go and look at your face in the mirror in the morning, and how unique it is, how designed it obviously is, and be honest with yourself. Could that have come about by pure chance, without a designer? And furthermore, he said, why is every single human being unique? If every human being is unique, it must be that the designer made every human being unique. Oh, you know something? I could have done with one of you guys to handle this, because I mean, part of me just wanted to not bother replying to his comment. Another part of me wanted to try and rebut his incredible ignorance about science. So, of course, I got back to him and I said that all the things he's talking about, the evidence points to it being occurring naturally. I said that, yes, every person is unique. I said that's the way nature works, that cells don't, when two people come together and they breed and they produce a replica of two people, the way that nature works is that it doesn't produce a perfect replication of those two people. Consequently, it's different, and every single person is different. 99% of the human genome we all share, and there's 1% that makes us different, usually our physical characteristics and some other things like that. But this is just as a result of the way that nature works, and there's no evidence that it needs a god. I mean, he's almost arguing that if there was no God, all human beings would be identical. All living creatures on earth would be identical with each other. There would be no differences. It's just so absurd. And the science is there to explain these things, why we're all different, why there are no why each and every person has got a unique DNA, genome, etc. So yeah, I mean, what to say to somebody that says something like that? Just that this is all explained by the theory of evolution. Now, about the theory of evolution, he said this, and I've heard this from so many theists. Oh well, it's not a fact; it's just a theory. Honestly, I mean, we've got gravitational theory, which Newton devised with all the mathematics to back it up, and I know that Einstein and later quantum mechanics is more accurate, but Newton's laws are still very, very quite accurate in their predictive power. So I try to explain that a theory is actually, if a theory can be tested by observation, it can make predicting, it has predictive power, and it has other uses, and it can be disconfirmed. If you can find one phenomena or one example or one observation which contradicts a theory, it will disprove it. And so far, the theory of evolution by natural selection, the way that it's um, been well, I hate to say the word fine tuned, it's been improved and honed over the decades, and the way and where it is now, it would take something really major to falsify it, and that to all intents and purposes, the theory of evolution by natural selection is accepted worldwide in academia, in the universities, in the educational institutions as an explanation for the diversity of life. And it's a fact. It's as close to a fact, probably, as many scientific theories could actually get. The evidence is there and it's backed up. So to say it's just a theory just betrays that you've done no reading on this at all. You've not bothered to acquaint yourself with uh, with some general reading on the theory of evolution by natural selection. And you don't really need to read a lot. I mean, I read The Blind Watchmaker, and I think really within a few chapters, I'd more or less got it. I understood how it works, the mechanics behind it, the process, the time scale, the way that it's not a guided process, that it's a kind of natural process which is sort of self-driven just by survival of certain characteristics which are beneficial and which give you a better chance of survival, random mutations, etc. And all he's got to do is spend a couple of days reading that material and to understand that, yes, all this diversity around us, all this amazing life is well explainable by Darwin. But the only people who contradict it are religious people because it's not consistent with their scriptures. And you will only really find occasional academics like Michael Behe who contradict the theory of evolution by natural selection in favor of intelligent design. Very rare, very, very rarely. And in his case, of course, his university has actually published a disclaimer saying that they don't agree with Dr. Behe's position on the theory of evolution by natural selection, and that's his own personal view. And it's been condemned as unscientific, which it is. There's no science. There's no science in intelligent design. What they do is they let real biologists do all the hard work, geneticists, and they let real scientists publish real research. And then all they do is they go out and read it and they say, "Oh, that's complex, isn't it? Wow, how could that have happened by pure chance? I know. Let's write a book." And they write a book, The Magic of Design, God's Wonderful Creation, all the science you will ever need to know. And then they publish it. They put it on Amazon. You know, millions of excited theists buy yet another book to add to their library of pseudoscience garbage. and try to comfort themselves that there's some kind of scientific backing to intelligent design. Yeah, so I mean, there isn't. And the only thing when I've said to ID people that, well, it hasn't got any predictive power, they say, oh, it has. We predicted that junk DNA wasn't useless, that it once had a purpose. We predicted that, and it turned out to be true. Well, I mean, any fool could have predicted that. I mean, it's not a remarkable prediction at all. It eventually science discovered why junk DNA um, wasn't always junk, that it actually had a purpose. So I mean, it's not remarkable at all. Yeah. So I mean, apart from that, what else has intelligent design predicted? Absolutely nothing. So okay, that was a lot of nonsense. I went on to say to him, look, most of the world's denominations in Christianity actually don't deny the theory of evolution. And it's true, the Roman Catholic Church, their position on the theory of evolution by natural selection. Oops. Uh, I'm going to have to end this stream because my computer's run out of power. I'll probably continue it next week. Thanks for watching.